This is the perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah!
Micah, Surge is really cute, but it will not work in my office, and it just doesn't help my clients.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA Podcast. I am your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you today?
Jarvis, it's another day in paradise. Just having a fantastic time. Just got back actually from Florida, so I know this is going to air a little bit later, but I did a business planning retreat with Joe Lucas. He
Coach
had
Joe,
about 70, 80 people in the room, which was fantastic. Did a lot of really good stuff, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about kind of in later pods as well, but you really need to sit down and make a dedicated time to do business planning. And while I know that's not on our topic today, one of the things that I love about going to Coach Joe Lucas is business meeting. His stuff, his content is good, so I like that.
Oh, yeah.
But the more important part for me, it's dedicated time to get it done. And he's all focused about business planning. So this isn't me magically thinking I'm going to do it when I'm home in between something else going on. It says, no, here's dedicated 3 days. I'm out of the office. I'm going to go through this. We're going to do business planning. And I'm going to be around other like-minded individuals that are committed to adding value to their clients, that are committed to doing a business plan. It's just a great thing we all need to do every year.
Here's a good piece I want to draw out there, Micah, that you're saying, I want to get my business plan done while I'm there. So often,
Yes.
We've talked about this before, we go to masterminds, we go to conferences, wherever, and we get excited and we get fired up. We have all these big ideas. And then if we look back a week, a month, a year later, nothing's really happened, right? We just sort of got excited, tore the doors off the building, and then that was the end of it.
And that was one of the things I made for like a public commitment. I know to you and to several other, because we run multiple businesses and whatnot. I reached out and said, hey, by the time I'm done with this, I'm going to come up with a one pager. It'll be an outline. It'll be finalized, but I'm going to have a one pager of a business plan. And I got to say, Jarvis, it was really cool actually too, because my one pager did it for each business. And then I put a summary together of what impact that's going to have in my life and what impact I'm going to make in other people's lives based on that. So kind of starting off with that is saying, you know what, I'm going to add that to my morning success ritual that I do every day, is reviewing this, is saying, why do we set things up a certain way? Why are we being intentional about our lives? And it's really because the amazing things we're able to do, using the talents, so to speak, that God has given us in so many great ways. And I want to bring that to the forefront.
Just curious, is not the theme of our podcast today, but did Joe do his event again in one of these like top floor banquet rooms with windows all around?
He did. Yeah, it was the Sonesta Hotel down in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, which was great. So it was a great view all the way around. And Jarvis, I sit in the back of the room when I'm at conferences for many reasons. But one of the things out the right window when I was looking at it, you have this beautiful ocean view, which is fantastic. And I was going back and forth between if I liked that view or looking to the left, you could see the marina. And a lot of people were focused on looking to the right, the big ocean and whatnot, which I think was fantastic. But when I glanced a little over there to the left, I see giant yachts. I see giant yachts that are sitting there, and you're more of a boatman than me, but I would imagine these yachts are nowhere near used as much as we think they are, maybe 30 days a year at max, and they're just sitting there waiting to be used. But I have $25 million yachts, $50 million yachts, probably a little bit more than that, just sitting there, and it just shows the pure wealth that could be had. Anyways, I get pretty inspired by that, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just wanted to highlight the rooms that Joe uses. I was at an event recently, and Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach was there. He says, everyone can do addition, but no one can do subtraction. And he says, what do you mean? He says, all of you are adding up how much money has been raised gross revenue, right? You're like a number of people, how much they paid.
Yep.
None of you are doing the subtraction on how much it costs to run this event. So in Coach Joe's example, I've not obviously seen his finances, nor do I care to. He pays there's a lot of subtraction that goes on to have that kind of venue, but Joe understands this is a venue that's conducive to the type of thinking he wants people to have, right? He could be in the dungeon of a standard hotel, probably save a lot of money, but that wouldn't create the experience. And so it's about being intentional. And Joe's incredible with this idea of let's be intentional.
I love it. Well, Jarvis, while I was there, this kind of spurred a little bit of the podcast topic today. We're sitting down there having sitting there having breakfast and lunch with other financial planners, which is great. And it still shows that we have a lot more reach we need to do with the TPR. Because there's a lot of them that had heard about us, which is fantastic. But there's a lot that haven't heard about these great ideas just yet. So sitting around a table with some other advisors, and we're chit-chatting about it. And one of them had just started Surge, but several others hadn't known about Surge. So we started talking about it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is a great idea. And one individual came up at the table and says, Micah, that's kind of cute, but Surge just won't work for my practice. And it's really not that that beneficial. And it was like, whoa, I could see my hackles coming up with it. And I was like, all right, well, let's kind of dive into this. Like, what are you referring to? And he really starts looking at the way I'm doing Surge. He says, you know what? It makes no sense for me to do 35 meetings a week. It makes no sense to do blah, blah, blah. And just starts kind of picking, so to speak, on my Surge. And I was like, whoa, we've missed a giant element here in Surge meetings. Well, in all of the ways that we've created our financial planning. And it's about being intentional. Jarvis, Surge meetings, as you know, is not replicating my calendar, is not replicating your calendar or somebody else's. It's being hyper intentional about what type of life are you trying to create and how do I do it with maximum effectiveness of not only time, but value to my clients.
Boy, there's so much of a victim mindset in this. And I know I'm guilty of it, right? We're each guilty of it in our own areas, right? But when I see somebody who has a successful practice, and you can define that however you want, I have my ways of defining it. When I see someone who has a successful practice and they're doing, in this example, Surge meetings differently than I am, I'm infinitely curious, right? Yes. Why are you doing it that way? What has been the impact? What are the pros and cons? What's worked? What's not? And when it's somebody that's willing to grow and has transparency, then we get into this discussion. Oh, I talked to an advisor before their Surge meeting, they physically mail a Surge meeting invitation to every client. Well, that's really interesting. How does that work? Idea. And what's in that packet and he had the numbers to support that. But it's easy to get stuck in that victim mindset. I can't do Surge because my team can't do that because my compliance department won't allow this. When you get focused on the can'ts, that's all you see in life. Yeah. And part of our job here on the Perfect IRA is to help you break through those. Like, hey, you're seeing the world a certain way. Let's rip those glasses off. Let's stomp on them and let's look at the world a different way.
A mentor of mine, Brian Tracy, I've learned a lot from him over the times. One of the things that he would often say is argue for your limitations, and sure enough, you're right. And that's 100% it, right? Yeah. That's that victim mentality. If you start arguing for all the things you can't do versus stepping back and saying, whoa, what if it works? What if there's a better way to do this? What if there's another way to improve? You know what? While we may have created the Surge meetings and concepts, I have learned a lot from other advisors implementing Surge that was like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or how about we do it this cycle? Or how about we do virtual meetings this way? It's been fantastic to see that growth in the industry and saying, you know what? We don't have all of the answers. This is a journey to the perfect RIA that we're all in this process of together. But how do we do this? So number one, you got to put a stop on that head trash. Mm-hmm. Really, really important. Anytime you start saying I can't or I won't or these other things, you really got to stop and say, okay, is this my own limitation I'm putting out or is this something that really exists? And again, if two other people can do this really successfully, then probably you can too.
Yeah, something I always like to look at when I hear different ideas, whether it's Surge meetings or anything else, I think, all right, how will this work in my practice or how could this work in my practice? And then what is the cost to me to implement this? So I always try to weigh those two, right? All right, I want to have an open mind. How could I make this work in my practice? And then I want to balance this with, all right, what would it cost me to implement it? Not necessarily in time, but in hassle and money, all these things. Then I can make an educated and informed decision on that. I could say, hey, listen, I don't want to do 60 meetings a week because that's more bandwidth than I want to commit. But if I did, here's how this would look. Or here's how I can go from 15 meetings to 18 meetings, right? We say, what can I learn for incremental improvement versus, Micah, to your point, putting up a wall, hey, this cannot work, head in the sand, I don't want to hear anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So let's get some things that are misunderstood about Surge that we're kind of coming out just a little bit. One of them is saying...
These, by the way, are not hypotheticals. These are the real ones we get.
These are the real ones we get, which are fantastic. Let's just lead off with this one. Well, really, you're just doing this so you can stick it to your clients and be out of the office more. Ooh, all right, that one hurts. Because a lot of what we do is being hyper intentional about adding massive value to our clients. Now, here's my argument, and somebody could have a counter argument. I'd love to have them on the podcast and actually go through this. And we could talk about some ways we went through this at the table when this individual brought this up. But you're sticking to your clients because you want to be out of the office more. Okay, that is one way that you could look at this, but let's refocus a little bit and say, am I adding more value than the average advisor? And am I adding more value than last year, right? Comparing to some random benchmark, how do I do that? Really what I'm saying is compared to last year, am I increasing the value I'm delivering to my clients? That's something I measure. That's something that I can control. Okay, great. How does Surge meetings help with that? Surge meetings allow me to be hyper proactive about when I'm doing things. We have figured out that there's a couple times a year that it makes the most sense to see our clients. Why? Because we've been doing this for over 20 years, right? So we figured it out that says this is when we want to get them in. The other thing we figured out is when we get them all in this period of time, we can make sure that all of our clients are on the same planning track. Jarvis, I know I struggled with this for years, and I think you did as well, is you would onboard clients. You'd have some clients a little slower than others. Some clients would move faster than others, all these other things. Where is a client in their financial planning process? And then I'd be scrambling in my meeting prep and says, well, crap, this client is in this step. This client is in this step. How are we doing on this one? And all this other follow-up. And I wasn't doing the best service I could for those clients. And Surge Meetings has systematized this where I know where my clients are in their planning process, and they know where they are in their planning process and how we're being proactive towards their goals.
Mike, I think some of the pushback on Surge, and whether it's this example of, hey, you're trying to stick it to your clients, or it's about being lazy, or whatever it is, I think some of it, and again, for listeners, kind of, open-minded here, I think some of it is it shines a light on where you know your practice is weak, right? And the exercise that we love to do, Micah, that you came up with is, hey, there's 2,080 work hours in a year, right? That's assuming you're working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 2,080 hours a week. Cool. How many of those hours are actually being used meeting with clients? Now, everyone's initial response is, well, all of them. Every
second. Actually, it's 4,000. I spend 4,000 hours a year meeting with clients.
Working 80-hour weeks. And then we do the math backwards, right? And I'll just do it really quickly. If you have 100 clients, you're meeting with them twice a year, an hour each time. That's 2 hours. Let's say an hour prep. That's 4 hours. 100 times 400. 100 times 4 is 400 hours out of 2,080. Let's say you're spending twice that much time. Let's say you're spending 5 hours per client per year. That's still, what's that, 500 hours? Let's say it's 10, that's 1,000 hours. Where is the other 1,000 hours going? This is now I know in your mind you're saying, no, my numbers are way different. Cool, run the math. Run the math on paper, do the math, and show me where that's really going. And then we'll have a second discussion on, well, how much of that is busy work? Like if you're doing a 2-hour client meeting, you're not delivering value for 2 hours. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the comments that came up at the roundtable, saying, well, I deliver more value to my clients because I meet with them more than you do. I said, okay, well, fantastic. How often do you meet with them? Twice a year. Okay, well, it's the same as I kind of do. Well, I meet with them for 2 hours a meeting versus 1 hour meeting. I was like, okay, time doesn't equal value, but sure, let's play that game a little bit. Now, this other advisor said, I'm so busy doing all of this stuff, I can't implement any of these value adds. I can't do it because I'm so busy doing these things. And I get that. Yes. I get it. Been there, done that, right? And this is one of the reasons that makes Surge such this amazing tool, is because it allows us to give us the time to do this. So I sat down with the advisor. I said, okay, let's go on this time venture that you had. Jarvis, I went through that same calendar that you went with. We came up with 1,000 hours. They were working 1,000 hours on highly productive stuff, which is meeting with clients, prospecting, preparing for meetings, all those other things that you got to do. I said, great. I'm sure you're working 40 hours a week. She was like, absolutely I am. I said, great. Where's the other time going? And there was this deer in the headlights look. I said, where's the other time going? I mean, you're saying Surge doesn't work. Okay, that's totally fine. But where's all of your other time going? And they were like, I have no idea. And I was like, now, I'm sure you're busy, but I call this playing office, right? And I am guilty of it just as much as the next person, but we're playing office. What Surge allows us to do, again, this goes back to intentionality, right? I want to be hyper intentional about when I'm working, what am I working on, and how is this delivering the most value to my clients? And we've also said we have advisors that really change their Surge to be intentional about their life. We have advisors that want to be there for their kids in the morning before they go to school, and they want to be back before they get home from school. Fantastic. Perfect. So they do less meetings per day than I do. It's not a meeting per day competition, right? Jarvis and I joke about that. It's just jest back and forth. This isn't who can do the most meetings in a day. We all lose. Doctors crush us in this, right? Okay. We are focused on being hyper intentional about delivering value and making sure we have the lifestyle we're trying to create. That's what Surge allows us to do.
Yeah, a big part of that is also you need this forcing mechanism, right? Whether we call it atrophy or whatever the case may be, we're just drawn as humans for whatever reason to being inefficient. I don't know why, it just is, right? And even Mike, advisors that have been doing Surge for decades, and even you and I were speaking literally last week about how do we make our Surge process tighter? Yeah. Where are we letting meetings slip out of Surge? Where are we kind of, if you let down your guard at all? So for advisors who are saying, geez, Jarvis and Micah, why are you talking about Surge again? I promise you, every single listener here has room to improve. And as you're here, this episode is airing middle of December. You're staring at 2,080 hours for next year for 2023. How tight are you going to run your Surge? How tight are you going to run your office? Or how much time, and all the science shows this, how much time are you going to spend being interrupted and your productivity goes almost to zero?
Yeah, that's the really, really important part, right? This is about being intentional. I've had clients, and it throws me off just a little bit, and I think I mentioned in the previous podcast, but during my surge, I had a client jump online, and I was chit-chatting with her, and she's like, Micah, how's surge going? And now this isn't a client-focused topic that we bring up. We don't say this is our surge cycle, et cetera, but she follows me on LinkedIn. She follows the stuff that we're going through, and she knows about it. I was like, oh, it's fantastic. Here's what we're doing, et cetera. So are we trying to hide this from clients? Absolutely not. I am very clear with my clients, especially when they're onboarding. It says, fantastic. This is the process when you're at a first-year client. On renewal clients, this is going to be our process. This is our process of success. We meet with our clients in the spring. We meet with our clients in the fall. Here's why this is most beneficial. This is the minimum we're going to meet with you. We could meet more if something comes up, but that's the very minimum we want to do. They love that intentionality.
Yeah, and a lot of what comes up, and this will be a thing that advisors mention, right? Oh, my clients call with questions, they call with things. A lot of that comes up because you haven't set good expectations. You haven't given it somewhere to live, right? So that if the client doesn't know when they're going to see you again, they don't understand a framework for that. When they have a question, they just think, I have a question for Micah. Let me just email or call Micah. But if they have this, hey, you know what, Micah told me we're going to meet in the spring and the fall every year, but if something really urgent came up, they could meet in between, then it has a place to live. Now, even better is when they know, hey, listen, I can actually just send a quick question to Micah's team and they'll take care of it, or they'll add it to the agenda for our next meeting. This, of course, and we've talked about this, is not they said, hey, they email in and they say, hey, my wife just died, and you say, oh, I can't see you for 6 months. That has never happened. Not the wife dying part. That has never happened ever. But that can't happen very often, by the way, or you're going to run out of clients. So there aren't that many big urgent events that come up if you have this framework in place.
Now, one of the things that kind of comes up a little bit is when I'm talking to the other advisors is, Micah, I don't have time to implement these value adds. I love the concept, but I'm too busy. Well, this is one of the reasons, and we mentioned this before, but why Surge is so important. It allows us the necessary time to work on our practice, right? Not in our practice. In our practice is meeting with clients on a daily basis, but that's the project focused thing. That's the value add focused thing. That's how are we delivering more value in 2023 than I did in 2022? That's a great question that you should be answering in your business plan every friggin' year is, how am I upping the bar? How am I adding more value? That's not more time in the seat. That's not more time meeting with clients, right? You get a diminishing return depending on how long you're spending in that meeting room with clients. And there's tons of studies that go into this time and time again, but 45 to 60 minutes is about the max. Then clients really start deteriorating. You got to have some break inside of this. So just meeting with your clients longer does not add value. What are you going to do in 2023 to add more value to your clients?
Yeah, and a key takeaway from this episode, especially as you're looking at 2023, is to watch your language around things. So, Micah, you mentioned this class when we hear this all the time. Hey, I don't have time. Just stop right there, right? Elon Musk is running like 3 world-changing companies at once, and now a 4th, or however many he's up to, right? We have time. And unless you're Elon Musk listening to it, in which case, Elon, thank you, man. You're doing great work. Short of that, everyone else who says they don't have time, that's a victim's mindset. You're lying to yourself. So you can say, hey, because I choose not to implement value adds, and then we'll tease you about that. Or I choose not to implement Surge, we'll tease you about that. But don't say you don't have time. Right.
And I get a lot of respect for somebody of just saying, look, I'm choosing not to implement Surge, and here's why. Okay, great. You're being intentional about it. But saying I can't, it's like, ooh, all right. And Jarvis, one of the quotes that, by the way, Elon, thank you so much. I'm getting Starlink here in a couple of weeks. I just got my order confirmation. So appreciate you putting that through, Elon. I'm sure he's listening to the pod. All right. But one of the things that I really love to tell people time and time again is we all have the same 24 hours in a day. Elon Musk doesn't have more hours in a day. Bill Gates doesn't. Warren Buffett doesn't. Bezos doesn't. Like, name the person that has more than 24 hours in a day. We don't. We all have the same 24 hours in the day. I love it because it is our great equalizer. It really is. You all have the same 24 hours. What are you going to do with your 24 hours? That's what defines highly successful people from those that are not.
Well, and Micah, so much of this comes back to why we do our masterminds, why we do our Invictus events, because it is incredibly difficult to make these changes, right? We need that extreme accountability. In fact, you just went through a round of this with your own Surge meeting. You made a major change to your Surge, and there was a real reason. There was a good reason for you to kind of welch on that bet, so to speak, and you said, no, this is my extreme accountability. I will make it work, and you kind of moved heaven and earth to make sure that you made your commitment. These things, some people can do them just on willpower alone. Odds are no. We need someone to say, hey, listen, this is what has to be done. Someone we trust, by the way. There's plenty of experts. And actually, one reached out to me the other day. It was really kind of funny. I'll have to send that to you later. it's easy to talk about Surge. It's easy to say, hey, this is how Surge should work. It's a lot different when a client calls and says, hey, can I come and meet with you on a time slot that's not available in Surge? That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you need to spend your time with people who are doing it, not talking about it.
Yeah, and again, that is not the, hey, I just became a widow conversation or an emergency conversation. I'm going to put a call in with a client tomorrow, which is outside of a mini surge, because a life-changing event happened. And it's not like we're going to say, sorry, I can never talk to you ever again because it's outside of 6 months. No, a life-changing event happened, and it's going to come up from time to time. But you're talking about a one-off thing. You're talking a couple times a year thing of these happening, not on every single month, every single week, every single day that these events are happening.
Let's highlight that one a little bit more, right? So that's a common reason to say, hey, I can't do Surge because clients have things come up. But by doing Surge, and Jocko Willink talks about this, right? He talks about this being a Navy SEAL. He said, hey, we work in this ultra variable environment, right? Like you don't know which door the bad guy's standing behind to shoot at. You talk about a variable environment, but he says, hey, the more we can streamline, right? We streamline how we talk on the radio. We streamline on how we load our guns. We streamline on all these things. Same for your practice. So if my practice is running Surge, it's running value adds. When a client has an issue like that, their spouse passes away, I know for a certainty, hey, we reviewed their beneficiaries on this cycle. We reviewed their estate documents on this cycle. Yep. I have a lot of bandwidth. I'm not having to cancel other appointments to take care of this. So again, I'm looking for a downside on Surge, and people kind of throw that out. Hey, quit hiding behind Surge or whatever that means. I sincerely want to see a scenario where Surge does not help the client experience, does not improve the client's life.
Yeah, exactly. Boy, this is where I just want to be joking. It says, well, if you're not doing Surge, clearly you're not a fiduciary. But
but at least I'm advice only. That's
right. That's an inside joke. Sorry about that one. But no, I think this is really, really important to be thinking about is the intentionality between what we're doing. And there's this other thought that's out there that says it's a multitasking, right? We can only do one conscious activity at a time. Now, we all multitask all of the time, but we multitask subconscious things, right? I'm breathing and I'm going to be conscious about it, right? But I'm not conscious about my breathing. It just happens subconsciously. I can walk and talk. All of these things happen subconsciously, but our mind can only handle one conscious activity at a time. Now, why this is really important about Surge is because we're streamlining. So the process that's there is that I know how my meeting prep is going to be set up. It's not a decision I have to make 100 times. My meeting prep is always the same. It is always the same. Right now, there could be other stuff. I got to meet with a widow. There's other stuff that's going to be added to that when we go through when a client passes away checklist that we have, but I don't need to rethink this entire process this entire time. Now, why is this so important? Because now when I have to meet with the widow, when I have to get on that 911 call, when I have to do these other things, I know that all of these things have already been done, and I don't need to rethink, do I need to check my beneficiaries? Was the distributions overdone? Do we have enough money in cash? The market's down. How are we going to do this? Now their pension's going to go away. Do we have that survivor benefits? I don't need to think about any of that. I trust my former self. I trust the processes that we have in place, and everything as of October was up to date. Fantastic, right? At least I have that stake in the ground. Now I can go into that client experience where my mind's not turning on all of these other things I'm trying to think about. I can go into that meeting focused solely on the client, trusting the process that we have everything else taken care of. And that's huge.
It really is. Micah, let's talk a little bit as we kind of towards the tail end of this episode. What can advisors start implementing right away? So if you're not doing Surge, or even if you need to refine Surge, right, whatever that is, you want to make sure that you've got scripted in your mind, you've got written out for your team how this is going to be communicated to clients and how you're going to handle when a client pushes back, which I always view as the universe testing me, right? So when I first said, hey, I'm never going to meet with clients on Mondays or Fridays, I swear, Micah, immediately every single client called asking to meet with me on a Monday or a Friday, right? That's just Murphy's Law. Call it whatever you will.
Right.
So I worked with Colleen. Matthew sees clients on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Which one of those days works best for you? Oh, I'd really love to see him on Friday. Yeah, no, I understand that. But Matthew sees clients on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And then if a client pushed back again, Colleen then would say, you know what, Fridays is the day that Matthew spends working or spending time with his family. It's also when he works on projects for clients, so he's just not available to do meetings that day. And if they push back a fourth time, then we have this escalation where Colleen says, you know, I'll have to ask Matthew, but until I hear back from him, can I schedule you on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday? Until I hear back from him. And so we kind of just worked through that because she had her head trash, I had mine. But if you think to yourself, you know what, in 2023, I'm not going to see clients on Friday, but you don't have a system for that, it's not going to happen.
The other thing that I want to say inside of this, an action item that you really need to think about is
Please.
a pre-appointment checklist.
Yes.
If you want to, and I talked about this came out a lot in our meetings. And someone was like, how do you do so many meetings in Surge? And it was like, it was systematized, right? Mm-hmm. And just because, now granted, we have some automation systems that we spent a lot of money to set up and develop, which I'm not saying everybody needs to go run out and do. Your team can do this, right? You can have a checklist and say, hey, for each meeting, these are the things that I want you to put together. And this is my homework sheet. This is my client intake form. This is my meeting prep sheet, whatever you want to call it, and have your team go fill that sheet out. And that sheet should have all of the basic information that you normally look at prepping for a client meeting. Why? Because you shouldn't be spending all of that time to go and look for that. The team should be pulling that data together. What is another benefit of having a pre-appointment checklist? If your team is doing this in advance and you're missing something like a tax return, right? You're going in for a client review and you don't have last year's tax return. Now your team can instantly say, hey, I don't have the tax return. Maybe I should reach out to the client and ask them to bring it in their meeting, right? So there's a huge benefit of the team going through this pre-appointment checklist, and it streamlines the value you're delivering to your clients. It increases it dramatically.
That's right, because then the time I'm spending doing case prep is not spent combing through the CRM looking for data. It's not spent combing through memos. It's not spent logging into the custodian. It's all there. So when and this is a pushback on Surge, hey, I want to offer personalized advice to my clients. Me too. And my advice is 10x more personalized than yours because I'm not spending my time digging back through old dictations or gathering together data or printing statements. That's all being streamlined for me. Sort of like every other profession. Sort of like when I get on a plane and I'm like, hey, pilots, where are we heading? Like, I don't know. We're going to figure that out where we go. I mean, when I fly with Micah, it's that way. Actually, even when I fly with Micah, there's still a list. But again, pilots are doctors, right? The doctor doesn't say, hey, well, I wonder what tools I should have set out today, like for this surgery. I wonder maybe a pair of pliers or something. No, it's all set out and it's sterilized and it's ready. And he or she isn't washing the tools themselves. They show up, they put the gloves on, and in they go.
Yeah, it's mission critical things. And in our job, is that important, right? Don't sit there and say, well, a doctor, it's about life-saving stuff. You know what? You run out of a client's money because you made piss poor decisions and you didn't help them. You don't think that's life-changing stuff? You don't think that's world-ending stuff? I don't know about you, but that's pretty damned important. And to me, the stuff that we do has a dramatic impact in our client lives, and we need to look at ourselves in that same way. And Jarvis, I'm going to add on there a third action item, which is a client communication policy, right? You got to be able to communicate this to your clients, as you were just saying about when do you have meetings? How do you respond to emails? How do you communicate best with clients? How do they know when to escalate things and when things should not be escalated, right? Because clients don't know. And so you got to be able to have that communication policy. And just like any of these things that we're delivering to a client, we have to let the clients know multiple times what this is. Now, this isn't any negative respect to my clients. My clients are extremely intelligent in their field. So a lot more intelligent than I am in their fields and all the stuff they do. But just like when I'm going to do something and I sign up and I work with somebody new, I don't remember all of the steps. It's great when the professional comes in and reminds me of these other things. Learning to fly a helicopter. I've been a pilot for over 20 years. Doing checklists and whatnot. Well, guess what? My helicopter flight instructor comes in and says, remember you forgot to do this. This is what's different. All of these things, right? They're coaching me through it. So even though they've already told me once, they still got to tell me several other times to make sure I'm getting in these great habits and I'm learning to do this. It's the exact same thing with a client.
Yep, and as you're making that change, right, whether your change is your surge meeting process or anything that's client-facing, right, we always want to communicate that with clients. And Micah, I always say this, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we are always looking for ways to deliver more value to you and your family. We're always looking for ways to make your life easier, to make your finances better. In fact, and you may not know this or care, Mr. and Mrs. Client, but we spend a lot of time and money each year being mentored by some of the best financial planners in the country on how to ways to improve the value that we deliver. One of the things we're going to change this year, surge meetings, whatever the case it is. But I'm really positioning that. And then as that change goes on throughout the year, I said, Mr. and Mrs. Client, remember back in January, I told you we were making some really cool improvements. And here is that improvement. And so you've got a process in place. You have a process for feedback, et cetera.
Okay, awesome. Podcast is all about action items. Go take these action items, go implement them. One of the feedback I did get from someone at this conference, Jarvis, is we give out too much action items. They don't know what to do and to take and to move forward because every week they're like, I want to do everything. I totally get that. Just do one thing. Even though we give 3 things, even though we talk about 10 different ideas, you got to pick one. And that's the biggest thing whenever I go to a conference, and I would talk to this before, I want to walk away with one doable thing that I'm going to implement. That's better than 100 ideas. That one thing that I'm going to do and implement. Same thing with this podcast. What's that one thing? And it should be 5 stars. Come on, you got to give us out there, right? Send this out there. Share this. As you already know, we have over 1 million downloads because you, our listeners, are just amazing. And you share and help grow this podcast. We have some really cool things planned for this next year. At some point, we're going to be able to share those with you guys. But until then, keep this message going. We're looking at transforming the industry. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.